beyond just the symbol of the covenant, it is where God resided.
Right.
Right. And like we see that when he talks about it here, he says that they went and got the ark, which is called by the name of the Lord of hosts, who sits enthroned on the cherubim, right?
It's a long name.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this was, so for David, who we've kind of talked about this, his whole point, everything that he said since he first comes to fame is like, God is first. God is foremost. The ark went first because God led the armies, just like we talked about with David and his armies. When he comes out, he's like, God, do I do this? Or what are you going to do? What do you want me to do? What are your plans, right?
Yeah.
So this is huge because David's like, I can't be enthroned as a king if God is not enthroned over the kingdom, right?
Welcome back to the Physics of Faith podcast. I'm Tommy.
And I'm Tim.
And we are continuing on in the life of David, our series on the life of David. And we are basically just picking up right where we left off last time. Our last episode, we basically looked at chapter 5 of 2 Samuel. And so we're not going to skip ahead any this time. We are going to pick up right back where we left off in chapter 6. But just to very briefly recap, basically in chapter 5, David was finally anointed the king over Israel after many years of preparation. He captures Jerusalem, defeats the Jebusites, and also defeats the Philistines while he's at it, because they find out about that. They come to, it's like, oh, we got to get him now. And, God is with David in all of his battles, and that obviously goes the way David planned. So basically, David has taken Jerusalem. He's built it out. He's fortified it, and is basically becoming the main capital and the place of basically kind of the beginning of what it is today is the city of David, quote unquote, in the holy city.
Yeah, we didn't really mention that in the last episode, but I found it interesting that he named it after himself. The city of David.
Yeah, we did kind of skip over that.
Which is, we talk about David does such a great job of giving God all the credit, but then in that one instance, he's like, yeah, this is my city.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so we're just going to pick up here in chapter 6 of 2 Samuel. And so we'll start with we'll read first verses 1 through 7.
All right.
David again brought together all the able young men of Israel, 30,000. And he and all his men went to Baalah in Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the name of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim on the ark. They set the ark of God on a new cart and brought it from a house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were guiding the new cart with the ark of God on it, and Ahio was walking in front of it. David and all Israel were celebrating with all of their might before the Lord, the castanets, harps, lyres, timbrels, sistrums, and cymbals. When they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of God because the oxen stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore God struck him down, and he died there beside the ark of God. So, this is a very joyous event here. Basically, David has captured the city of Jerusalem, and now he is bringing the Ark of the Covenant into the city of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And this is a big deal. And this is kind of, we haven't heard about the Ark in a while. This is really the first, obviously we haven't talked about it in this series yet, but if you read back through the Bible, it hasn't really been mentioned since 1 Samuel chapter 7 was the last mention of the Ark. But basically, for those of you who don't understand, basically what the Ark of the Covenant is that's what they were searching for in Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Don't open it. Don't open it.
Yeah, don't open it. Don't open it. But basically, it's a big box that carried the stone tablets that God put the 10 Commandments on.
Yeah.
And I guess at this point, it also carried the staff of Aaron that had budded. And basically, this was built to very specific basically very specific not recommendations, but details and instructions that God gives. Like, this is how big it is. This is what it should look like.
Yeah, he gave them the IKEA blueprint, basically.
Yeah. And so David wanted to bring it, he had built up this palace and he wanted to bring it into a place of honor, because this was this was the thing that led them through. I mean, when Joshua defeated Jericho, when they marched around the city 7 times, the ark was the first thing that went.
Yeah.
You know, that was what always led the armies was the Ark of the Covenant, because that's literally what it was, the Ark of the Covenant that God had made with His people.
Right. Well, beyond just the symbol of the covenant, it is where God resided.
Right.
Right. And like we see that when he talks about it here, he says that they went and got the ark, which is called by the name of the Lord of hosts, who sits enthroned on the cherubim. Right.
It's a long name.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know. So this was. So for David, who we've kind of talked about this, his whole point, everything that he said since he first comes to fame, is like God is first, God is foremost. The ark went first because God led the armies, just like we talked about with David and his armies. When he comes out, he's like, God, do I do this? Or what are you going to do? What do you want me to do? What are your plans, right?
Yeah.
So this is huge because David's like, I can't be enthroned as a king
Yeah.
if God is not enthroned over the kingdom, right? And so he wants to have that near him so that he can always be hearing from God, learning from God, and doing this. And, you know, you mentioned, you know, God gave them very specific ways to build this ark, right? And one of the ways that they built this was it needed to have these poles, right? And the reason was it needed to be carried.
Right.
And they were not doing that.
Yeah. So we'll get to that. Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. I do want to just briefly mention verse 5. You know, we talked when we first see David, or one of the first things we see David do is play the harp and the lyre. He was obviously very musical.
Yeah.
And this was a celebration that they were doing.
Yeah.
Verse 5 says, celebrating with their might before the Lord with castanets, harps, lyres, timbrels, sistrums, and cymbals. I mean, this was, they were worshiping God with bringing this, when bringing this into the city.
Oh, yeah. I think, you know, David has a place in biblical history and kind of our understanding. You know, he's a writer of many of the Psalms. We often think of him as a musician. He's, you know, the heart of David, and the idea of David is something that I think a lot of worship leaders lean into.
Yeah.
You know, they want to write songs the way David wrote songs. They want to honor God the way David honored God, right? So David is so musical. It makes sense that he would have all of these instruments and all of these people praising and kind of doing it in a way that it's almost like, it's funny. I know they had these celebrations and things, but like the way David does it, and we'll get into this here in a minute, it's almost like that church that first introduced drums. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like where people are like, hey, we're not ready for that. You know?
Yeah.
But he was like, we're gonna worship. This is God. We're gonna go all out.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you mentioned that God gave very specific instructions on to what this was look like and to how to be used. And so, there were supposed to be rings on the side of it with poles on the side so that it could be carried on the shoulders of men.
Yeah.
And that was, and actually we'll go ahead and read just very briefly Numbers chapter 4. Numbers chapter 4, starting in verse 15, it says, after Aaron and his sons have finished covering the holy furnishings and all the holy articles, and when the camp is ready to move, only then are the Kohathites to come and do the carrying. But they must not touch the holy things, or they will die. The Kohathites are to carry those things that are in the tent of meeting. So that's Numbers chapter 4, verses 15. So again, this is back in Numbers. This is hundreds of years before David. And God gave various instructions on, I mean, this is where God, as we said, this is where God dwelled. And so this is to be carried on shoulders. And there was a purpose here.
Yeah, I was reading one commentary, and they were discussing how the presence of God needs to have weight.
Yeah.
And, you know, this idea that you could just build a machine that would carry God's glory for you.
Yeah.
Is kind of sacrilegious, right?
Yeah.
defeats the purpose of putting yourself under the weight of God, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And so we know that when God gives a command, when God says this is how you're going to do it, he does it for good reason. It's not just arbitrary.
Well, and and we see in here probably why, because they put it on a cart, the ox stumbled, and the thing started to tip over.
Right.
You know, I could see God like, that's why I wanted you guys to carry it.
And yeah, and it's not just because he doesn't want it to dent or break either.
Right.
We talked about this. God hates sin.
Yeah.
And he doesn't just hate it. He can't be with it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, this is why sin separates us. And this is why he allows it to separate us, because if it doesn't separate us and he comes fully into our presence, we're done. We're toast. It's over. So here's the box, the ark, in which God sits and the presence of God sits.
Yeah.
And you put out your hand and you touch it.
Yeah.
Like
that, something that he has very clearly said, do not do.
Right. And I feel like this is important, is he didn't say, do not do this or I will kill you.
Yeah.
He says, I don't want you to die, so don't do this. Right. And so, like, yes, his anger burns in that moment, but his anger, he has no choice but to have his anger burn in that moment because he is righteous and we are not.
Yeah.
Right. So he tells us these things so that we are safe.
Right.
And it reminds me of the Chronicles of Narnia and C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
Where somebody asks about the lion, Aslan. He says, is he safe? And they said, no, but he is good.
Yeah.
And like, that is the way we need to look at God. God is not necessarily safe for us because we are not good, but he is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So, and it's one of those things where it sounds unfair, like this guy didn't know. He's trying to keep it from breaking and falling off. But again, God was clear, and touching this was obviously made God very angry because he had made it clear that this was not to be done.
Yeah.
Now, thankfully, it doesn't talk about this in 2 Samuel, but eventually they do get it right. So I want to jump ahead a little bit into 1 Chronicles chapter 15, verses 1 and 2. Now, we haven't really talked about this yet, but 1 and 2 Samuel and the story of David kind of is told twice, a little bit in the Bible. So if you read through 1 and 2 Samuel and Kings, and then you read Chronicles, you're like, wait a minute, didn't I already read this? But it's important to know the Bible isn't necessarily one long story in one version. Chronicles is kind of another telling of the story of mostly David. And this is really kind of where it starts to duplicate a little bit, because the first part of the first several chapters are a lot of the lines and the genealogy. But basically, 1 Chronicles chapter 15, it's talking about the same kind of moment in history. It says, after David had construction buildings for himself in the city of David, he prepared a place for the ark of God and pitched a tent for it. Then David said, no one but the Levites may carry the ark of God, because the Lord chose them to carry the ark of the Lord and to minister before him forever.
Yeah.
And so after they get it wrong, put it on a cart, a guy dies, like, oh, shoot. We messed this up.
Got a little ahead of myself.
And it said, well, we'll read it. It's the very next verse. Then David was angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah, and to this day this place is called Perez Uzzah. Yeah. So obviously he was upset about this, but then he got it right at least. He messed up, but he got it right. Yeah. And that was God's command from the very beginning. For the Levites they were the priests. They were the ones to do the work.
Yeah.
Back years ago. So he found Levites to carry it into Jerusalem.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll pick this up in verse. We'll read verses 8 through 11. Then David was angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah, and to this day that place is called Perez Uzzah. David was afraid of the Lord that day and said, how can the ark of the Lord ever come to me? He was not willing to take the ark of the Lord to be with him in the city of David. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. The ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite for 3 months, and the Lord blessed him and his entire household. And so we kind of talked about this already, but I guess David was angry because a guy died. Yeah. But when you think about, like, he really didn't have any right to be, because, like, you were in the wrong here, dude.
Well, it just says that he's angry,
Yeah.
right? And I think this is the thing. I think David has a lot of reasons he can be angry.
Yeah.
I think it's also fair to say that just because God does something good doesn't mean we're always going to like it,
That's true.
right?
That's true.
And we might struggle with God's judgment. I think a lot of people struggle with God's judgment, and that's why they deconstruct, right?
Yeah.
But David here could be mad that God did this,
Yeah.
but he doesn't question God about it.
Yeah.
He could also be angry that, like, in my quickness to want to do what was right, I ignored the laws of God.
And a man died because of it. Yeah.
Uzzah's dead because of David,
Yeah.
not because of God.
Yeah.
Right. So
That's a great point.
so I think David could even potentially be angry at himself, and he's upset. And I think that might be more the case.
Yeah.
Or he might just also be in a state of somewhat of despair because he sees God strike down Uzzah, and what we see is he's now afraid of God. He's afraid to bring the ark to Jerusalem. Why? Because David always thinks that he is not pleasing.
Yeah.
David kind of has this humility that sometimes becomes a self-deprecating humility,
Yeah.
right? And he's like, well, if Uzzah's gone,
Yeah.
why would I bring God's glory with me?
Yeah.
Like, he's not going to approve of me if
Yeah.
he struck down Uzzah for this. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so he becomes afraid and has to stop. And some of this is reverence, some of this is fear, some of this is healthy fear, some of this maybe not.
Yeah.
But either way, this causes him to stop and take a moment and say, I'm moving too fast,
Right.
and I'm not considering who God is in my movement.
Yeah. 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 So, so instead of bringing it right into the Ridge City, he takes it to the house of Obed-Edom.
Yeah.
Now, this actually makes perfect sense because, as I just read, the Levites were the one who were supposed to carry the ark.
Yeah.
Obed-Edom was from the Levite family,
Yeah.
and so he of Kohath. So this is really who should have taken care of the ark anyway from the very beginning.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And so, they were the ones who were instructed to care for the ark and take care of it. And, this just also shows how powerful God is and how much power resided in the Ark of the Covenant, because just by it being in their house, the ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite for 3 months, and the Lord blessed him and his entire household.
Yeah.
Just by it being in his household, they were blessed by it being there.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll continue on. We'll do verses 12 through 15. Now King David was told, "The Lord has blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he has, because of the ark of God." So David went to bring up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. When those who were carrying the ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps, he sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. Wearing a linen ephod, David was dancing before the Lord with all his might, while he and all Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouts and the sound of trumpets. So, as I mentioned, obviously in Chronicles, they're carrying it now.
Yeah.
They're doing the right thing.
They got the Levites. They got them carrying.
Now that they're getting it right, he's making even a bigger. He was doing harps and cymbals and all of these things when they got it wrong the first time, and now and they're continuing to make a big production.
Yeah.
They took 6 steps with the ark, and he made a sacrifice just for those 6 steps.
Yeah. Yeah, he really goes out to show God penitence, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that's interesting here, he continues to do what is right,
Yeah.
even in fixing what he did that was wrong.
Right.
Their celebratory attitude wasn't necessarily wrong.
Yeah.
The worship that they went before God wasn't necessarily wrong. Where they messed up was while they were trying to honor God with their song and their dance, they were not paying attention to how they were carrying God.
They missed the details.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now that he's got it right, we're going to continue to do the things that are right, and we're going to fix the things that were wrong.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so, so obviously they take 6 steps. He sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf, And this is so. I want to talk a little bit about the movie Footloose. No, for those of you who have seen the movie Footloose, obviously that's about a town that bans dancing, and
Sure.
the one of the students, he's at a basically a council meeting, and he literally quotes part of this Bible that David danced.
Yeah.
And he's dancing out of pure worship. This wasn't, he wasn't putting out a piece of cardboard and was doing hip hop and spinning on his head to make himself look cool. He was dancing out of pure worship. This was all part of the music and the celebration. And he was so filled with joy that he was dancing, literally dancing for joy.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a line in a Supertones song from back in the 90s where he says, "David, my great grandfather, was a dancer." And it's with David, it is always about joy and celebration, but specifically not just dancing, right? Like Kevin Bacon wants to dance because Kevin Bacon likes to dance, right?
Right, yeah.
David's not like, I just want to do ballet. David was like, I'm going to dance because the living God is coming to reside in our capital.
Right.
Like his kingdom is truly being established, right? We're seeing the fruits of all of the turmoil that they've gone through since leaving Egypt, right? God says when they left Egypt, hey, I'm going to give you to a land of milk and honey, and you're going to have a place there, right?
Yeah.
And then they just keep messing it up.
Right.
And so here's David, like, we're finally getting to this place.
Yeah.
And he is celebrating everything God has done for him, everything God has done for his people, and how he has carried them to this point.
Yeah, for sure. And so obviously David is, this obviously has nothing to do with absolutely anything, but I was watching an interview with Kevin Bacon.
Okay.
And he was talking about how he'll go to a wedding and he will go to the DJ and he'll give him like $50 or $100, like, please do not play that song. Because every time you hear do, it's like everybody's like, it's like, do not play that song. But he actually does it out of humility because he's like, I want this to be about the bride and the groom, not about the fact that the guy from Footloose is here.
Yeah.
So let's play Footloose. Again, so Kevin Bacon's a little like David. He has a little bit of humility.
There's a little
he wants the
humility.
focus to be on the right things.
Good for Kevin Bacon.
Yeah. Anyway, so and I want to we'll read on here in a minute about this, but verse 14, wearing a linen ephod, David danced. So this is kind of like a T-shirt, okay?
Yeah.
And so, actually, let's just go ahead and read it, and we'll jump back to this after we read this first. So, we'll read the rest of the chapter here, verses 16 through 23. As the ark of the Lord was entering the city of David, Michal, daughter of Saul, watched from a window. And when she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she despised him in her heart. They brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place inside the tent that David had pitched for it. And David sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings before the Lord. After he had finished sacrificing the burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord Almighty. Then he gave a loaf of bread, a cake of dates, and a cake of raisins to each person in the whole crowd of Israelites, both men and women, and all the people went to their homes. When David returned home to bless his household, Michal, daughter of Saul, came out to meet him and said, "How the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, going around half naked in full view of the slave girls of his servants, as a vulgar fellow would." David said to Michal, "It was before the Lord who chose me rather than your father or anyone from his house when he appointed me over the Lord's people Israel. I will celebrate before the Lord. I will become even more undignified than this, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes. But by these slave girls you spoke of, I will be held in honor." And Michal, daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death. So, we go back several chapters in a couple weeks. Saul wanted to give David Michal because he killed Goliath. And Saul was like, I'm not worthy of Michal. Now, I think also part of it was that he knew Michal didn't have good intentions. And we see here now that where Michal wasn't the most godly of
Yeah.
people.
I think if I remember correctly, Saul picks up that Michal is infatuated with David.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And it says that Michal loved David. I think infatuated might be the better term.
Yeah.
I think, she's a young woman. He's
Yeah.
a young man. He's the hero. He killed Goliath. They sing songs about him.
Yeah.
She's a little infatuated with him, and Saul wants to use that and gets them married. Now, Michal protects David at different points, right?
She did.
And
Yeah.
protects him against her own father.
Yeah.
Right? But I think here we see maybe some of the honeymoon stage is more off a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
Also, can we just point out that Michal's his first wife,
Right. Yeah.
who's been with him since he was like 18.
Yeah.
Right? He's 30. And as we saw in the last chapter, he's taken additional wives and concubines.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think there's some fairness in her feelings about how he presents himself a little bit. But so at this point, she's kind of bitter towards David. And when she sees him dancing in his T-shirt, she sees that. Like, I think she takes that and associates that with lascivious behavior.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're essentially parading half naked in front of the slave girls for their attention.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing.
Yeah. That's what she was saying anyway.
Yeah, that's
Now-
what she's accusing him of.
That's not completely the whole truth here.
Definitely not.
As we mentioned, in a linen ephod. Now, basically, a linen ephod is what priests did their work in.
Yeah.
And so what he was wearing, this wasn't a mesh T-shirt that was like sleeveless. I mean, this was
is really going to show off my ass.
yeah. I mean, it was. Basically, he had taken off his royal robes, is basically what it was. And I think that I've read some of the commentaries that was one of the things that Michal was upset about as well, is that he wasn't being royal at this point. He wasn't being kingly.
Yeah.
He was being kind of a regular Joe, really.
Yeah.
And, so again, the wearing the linen ephod was not inappropriate, and dancing was not inappropriate.
Yeah.
But the combination of all of these things and, probably some of Michal's just undesire for lack of worship towards God. All of these things played in together, and that's where this marital argument comes in.
Even if she has reason to be jealous, even if she has reason for bitterness, she does not have, and we do not have, the right to criticize those who worship God,
right,
or their intentions in doing so. Out of our bitterness.
Yeah.
Like, it's not okay. We still have to guard our hearts. We still have to do what is right before the Lord, regardless. And again, David's not doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
That's why we have to guard our hearts from those things, because we might accuse somebody of doing something wrong when, in fact, they are not.
Yeah. Yeah, and, David kind of puts her in her place a little bit. It was before the Lord who chose me rather than your father or anyone from his house when he appointed me ruler over the Lord's people.
Yeah.
Like, dang.
David's appointment really caused the death of her entire family.
Yeah.
But this was God's plan, was for David to take over.
Yeah.
So he might be speaking to, having been her husband.
Yeah.
He might be speaking to the jealousies and the issues and the bitternesses that he knows she's carrying when she comes accusing him.
But and he makes it clear that, this was all out of worship. This wasn't for anything other than that. He says, I will celebrate before the Lord. I will become even more undignified than this, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes. But by these slave girls you spoke of, I will be held in honor. It's like, all the reasons that you say I was doing what I was doing, none of it is true. It is simply being caught up in the worship of the Lord, and I'll look even dumber than this to worship God. Yeah.
I think it's interesting. And it's interesting because in the NIV he says, "In my eyes," and in the NASB he says, "In your eyes," or in the ESV he says, "In your eyes." I think that's what I was just looking at here.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, but his point is that when it comes to how royalty look at dignity,
yes, yeah,
he's okay being undignified.
Yeah.
And we'll go even further.
Yeah.
In that, because he's not going further in sin, he's going further away from legalism.
Yeah.
That's kind of what he's doing.
Yep, yeah, for sure. And then so I think this last verse here is interesting. And Michal, daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death. Now, we don't know if that's just because God chose not to bless her with children. It may have been that David and Michal never slept together after this.
Right.
You know, we don't really know, but we kind of see like this is how it's like God has the end for my like. Okay, well. We're not going to bless you much anymore.
Yeah, we don't really know the hows or the whys necessarily, but it is definitely written there as a testament of like blessing for her would have been to have kids.
Yeah.
Right.
That was it for women in the day. That is how women were looked at with the number of kids that they were.
And I would even venture to say this, even in modern society, children are a blessing.
Yeah.
And it is not wrong for a woman to desire children.
Yeah.
And I think, somebody out there needs to hear that. Like, it's not a patriarchal thing. It's a way that God designed you.
Yeah.
And we should want God's blessings.
Yeah. I'll say this. This doesn't really have anything to do with this, but one of the things that I often get caught up in is that one of the things that women have for so long been trying to show that they can do everything that men can, that they've completely pushed aside the one thing that they can do that men can't, and have children.
Yeah.
That is, again, that's not the whole purpose for women, but
no,
it is that is something that women will experience with their children that men. That's a relationship that we cannot understand or even comprehend.
Exactly.
And again, that's not. There are plenty of women who won't ever get married and won't ever bear kids, and they're wonderful. That is okay. But yes, children are a blessing, and it is wonderful to do so.
Yeah, we can't let the world tell us that the things that set us apart and that make us special are holding us back.
Yep,
For sure. Whether it's that or something else in your life. So.
All right. So that finishes 2 Samuel chapter 6. We will be back in a few weeks with a big story. We're gonna skip ahead a little bit and really get into some of David's failings. But that's coming up here in our, obviously not next week, but the next time we're together.
Absolutely. All right.